No, from
I'm sorry,
Oxford.
Oxford, yes. Please. How are you, Muzaffar?
Very
Fine?
well, thank you. Alhamdulillah.
How's everybody? Fine, I hope. Huh? And how's your wife?
I'm glad to say there is a little improvement.
Alhamdulillah. The good news of your son's marriage, successful marriage at last with the grace of Allah, that might have got some good influence over her as well. Huh?
Yes, she's very happy about that.
Yes. Yes. So shall we begin with today's program? But before that, let me tell you, this morning as I was returning from the morning prayer, Imam Sahib reminded me that this day, exactly 10 years ago, my plane landed in London for this 10 years phase so far of self-imposed migration or imposed migration, whatever you may call it. Self-imposed in the sense that I was not forced by the government to leave the country directly in so many words. But the situation created by the ordinance of the late dictator Zia was such that if I had remained in Pakistan, it was impossible for me to remain a functional head of the Jamaat. So, as a non-functional head like vegetative growth, I would not accept that life at all. And after due consultation, immediate consultations with people from all over Pakistan who came and gathered in Rabwa, we decided that we have only two options. Number one, to remain in Pakistan as I have just suggested, to defy the law by declaring I am a Muslim, and then I should be imprisoned for at least 3 years, and then when I come out they ask me the same question again, and of course the same answer. I still remain to be Muslim, and even better Muslim than before, after suffering for the cause of truth, And then the same response by the government. So that means I would be totally disconnected with the Jamaat, both within Pakistan and outside Pakistan. And as you know, there cannot be two caliphs in the life of one. No other caliph can be elected, So that means the Jamaat should have attempted to survive without a caliph. It was impossible, inconceivable. The second thing was that I migrate immediately to some other country and there at least be in touch with the rest of the world. And also it transpired that operating from any other country, my contact with Pakistan would be much better and much stronger than if I remained in Pakistan. Now 10 years have proved these things to be so true and unbelievably true. The contacts have expanded, and now look at this television, everything. So with the grace of Allah, the promise that God gave in the Holy Quran, that if you migrate for the sake of Allah, then Allah will expand you and give you things which you can't imagine. Beyond your imagination, He will shower His graces upon you. That promise we have seen fulfilled, really beyond our wildest fancy. I couldn't believe what we are seeing today. 10 years ago, I couldn't imagine. Impossible. Even a year and a half ago, I couldn't imagine, You couldn't either, could you?
Not at all. Very rapid progress.
So this is how Allah does it. And this is how Allah has stamped on the validity of this migration. With His kindness, with His graces, He has proved that our action was for His sake, not for any other sake. So this is a good day, which is dawned today, and we are entering the 11th year. And that also is a very important number for us. not because we believe in numbers, but because with reference to a revelation of Hazrat Masih Maud Wasalam, which speaks of Baad 11 inshallah, after 11 inshallah, God willing. Now, various guesses have been, suggested, put forward regarding what the number 11 means. I myself, 2 years ago or a year ago, suggested that maybe it is after 11 years of my caliphate, which was in 1993. So I myself was not very sure, but because why after 11 years of my caliphate? There's no sense. And why not after 11 years of every caliphate? So there has to be some distinctively different situation relating to my fourth caliphate, which this grand news is referring to. So from that I suspected, although I didn't tell the Jamaat because they wanted to hear glad tidings very soon, So I said, maybe let's pray it is after 11th year of my caliphate, starting from 1982. But deep inside I suspected it could be, perhaps more probably, it could refer to my migration from Pakistan and 11 years after that. No, I'm not sure, this is my inference, but deep inside I have a feeling that this would be applicable. So I'm talking to you, but I'm reminding the whole Jamaat to remember this aspect in their prayers, that may Allah prove it to be true, this inference of mine,
Sure. I think from a personal point of view, Hazur, everybody remembers vividly what our feelings were when we'd heard that you arrived in Britain on that day, and the great shockwave.
You had already become an Ahmadi Muslim by that time. Achha, good. Tell me what it was. When you heard that I had safely arrived, what was your feeling?
Disbelief. Really? Nobody could imagine. Nobody could have imagined such a thing. I mean, I went to the Birmingham Mission House just for an ordinary meeting, and somebody said, Hazur's arrived. And arrived where? And he's in London, and everybody was like dashing into their cars and dashing all the way down here, and we were trying to get here for Maghrib prayer just in time, and everywhere was a great seething mass of people. People were praying outside the mosque, in the hall, everywhere. The place was jam-packed full of very happy, excited,
and do you remember
people.
The dream of your sister, is it sister-in-law or relative, close relative? Salih Safi, relative, of course. Your son, your brother-in-law's wife, Salih Safi.
Yes.
You know what happened on that day?
No.
You know? No. As my plane was arriving or had arrived, Salih Safi was traveling with some of her sisters in a car, moving from one place to another, and she related a dream to her that it's a strange dream I saw last night, that Jesus Christ is encircled by enemies, and they have drawn a round circular line around him, and somehow he cannot escape that. And they are watching from places which neither he can see nor Salih Safi herself can see, but their eyes watching and seeing to it that imprisoned person does not escape. So she felt extremely worried, and she said, I would not leave here until I see Jesus safely delivered. Somehow, how she wouldn't know, but this was the feeling in the dream. And then she said, waiting. Suddenly, I dozed off, and as I came back to my senses, my consciousness, returned to my consciousness, I saw there was no Jesus. the circle was empty. So she said, for a moment I was panic-stricken. What had happened? Then a voice from God told her that we have removed him to a safe place. This very morning, 10 years ago,
Yes.
she was relating this dream to somebody, and the response was, he has arrived.
He's there.
I mean, of course, it was metaphorical, the word Jesus, but the situation was like that. Enemies, not less determined to do harm to my body, as were those at the time of Jesus Christ. So this was just a metaphorical similarity. This is referred to, yes.
Jesus is taken in Ibn Maryam, then it very much applies to
That is, of course, but what I mean to say is the crisis of that moment was so close, so similar. And they were watching us. This actually was happening there in Pakistan. 5 Pakistani intelligence services were posted in Rabwa to watch every movement which I make or the Jamaat makes, and to see to it that we do not even step out of Rabwa without being noticed. So despite all this, this so happened. And as she dozes off, that's exactly what happened. As people went to sleep that night, early morning of the night when I left, this is how it happened, you know. People dozed off and I was not there.
And it's been said that you left Pakistan in disguise or in
Oh,
secret.
no, certainly not.
You just walked out, didn't you?
I walked out with the same passport showing me to be the head of the Ahmadiyya community. And it is marked, so I showed it to the biographer, Ian Adamson, and he has printed the photocopy of that. This was a propaganda made by mullahs that I went in disguise, I changed my passport, I did this and that. Inquiries were held immediately after by the government officials as to who was this officer who helped me have a new passport issued to me. Everything was false, fake, there was no truth in it. In fact, I made it very clear to the Jamaat. I said, look here, I accept your advice because I think this is a wise counsel. I must accept it, but on 2 conditions. Number 1, as far as my manner of escape, as you call it, is concerned, I am not going to change my guise. I am not going to change my papers. I am going to walk out of the frontier of Pakistan as head of the Ahmadiyya community. Under no other circumstances I will accept this counsel. And secondly, I said, if by that time or before the time I leave Rabwa, I am served with any paper, or even if I hear verbally that the government wants to inquire something from me, wants me to explain something vis-a-vis allegations against me and so on, even then I will not leave. I said, I don't want this blemish to remain as a permanent mark of disgrace on the face of a caliph, that he escaped from justice. So I know it will not be an escape for justice. It will be an escape from injustice. But still, as far as the history goes, nobody knows what that was. So they said, okay, we agree. So when I left Pakistan, it's unbelievable how things happened.
Were you wearing your normal clothes?
Of course. Everything was the same. Same turban, but I was leaving. Same normal clothes, and the same passport, of course. Now, what happened, that is miraculous. But there was not just one thing which happened so miraculously. There's so many things. I won't count them all. I think I mentioned it elsewhere and at different times. But one particular thing. My passport showed very clearly Mirza Tahir Ahmad, the 4th head of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. Very clear, largely written on the face of that page 4. And the instructions which were issued by the government at that time were that Mirza Nasir Ahmad the fourth head of the Ahmadiyya community, is not permitted to leave the country from any borders of the country, any means he so chooses to do, to employ. Now, this was the dilemma faced by the immigration officers. Now, later on, we investigated and we found what happened. What happened was that my passport, the previous passport had expired about a year ago. The passport which I used during my journey to England was issued by an Ahmadi passport officer at that time, who had no idea whatsoever as to any condition, any sanctions against me or anybody else in the Jamaat. What had happened before was this, that he had received a letter, like all other people in important positions, that Mr. So-and-so is not permitted to leave the country. Now, it did not mean that the passport should not be extended, of course, but it could be taken to mean that. So when he received this information, he was surprised that the order clearly said Mirza Nasir Ahmad. So he was not sure what the mistake was about. Was it about the fourth head or about the name, that sort of thing. So he repeatedly telephoned. He was so honest. He repeatedly telephoned the intelligence department directly to make it clear to him what was meant, because this was so absurd. He said, I wanted to tell them that I know the present caliph is so-and-so, not that and that which is written on the passport. And every time he rang, there was no response. The phone was busy. So he did it once, twice, three times, and some other days. Never was he connected to the officer concerned. So he forgot. And in the meantime, I appeared and I had to give him my passport. And I said, look here, this is my passport. And I want it to be reissued because the time of 10 years had expired. A new passport had to be issued. He said, yes, no problem. So he did it. And when I came to England, immediately afterwards, there was a high-level inquiry against him. He is the man who issued. And he said, yes, I did. No problem. He said, why did you do it? Didn't you receive this intimation? And now, this order was dictated by Ziaul Haq himself. Now, this is the greatest part of the miracle.
So no one would question.
Yes. No one would question. It was dictated by him, and because he happened to know Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad Sahib so much and so often, that this was the name, imprinted so indelibly on his memory, that my name had not yet got registered. Because he issued this order immediately after my becoming caliph. So, he was not yet used to, to my person occupying the same office. So he dictated the order, Mirza Nasir Ahmad. So that was the dilemma created, and it was not a question of an Ahmadi officer or a non-Ahmadi officer or a sympathetic or non-sympathetic officer. The immigration officers at the time when I was about to depart were all non-Ahmadis. They had no relationship with Ahmadiyat whatsoever. But there was the legal point confronting them. The person who is leaving, his name is Mirza Tahir Ahmad. The order issued is about Mirza Nasir Ahmad. What legal right have you got to stop him? This was the debate going on frantically, and my departure of the plane by which I was leaving, that is KLM, was delayed by 1 hour. And every time I saw activity going on, people coming in and walking out, and I said, what's happening? They said, oh, nothing, this normal delay by KLM. They have delayed their departure. I was surprised because at exactly 12 o'clock, I had received information that KLM car has reached to take me from the airport to the plane directly. This was arranged. And they always, previously too, also they treated caliphs with kindness, and they used to send 5 minutes before the departure. So I said, if it was they who had delayed the departure, then how could they have sent the car an hour before the departure? You see? So that was just a fake. There's no truth in that. They were delaying it. Now, what was happening? They were frantically trying to contact the chief of the Central Intelligence Bureau, Sheikh Basoor at that time. And somehow he was not available. The same telephone trick, employed by God, of course, in this case. In reference, not a trick, I mean, a device employed by Allah, like He does in so many cases. So, no answer. After my plane left, at about the time that it was over Abu Dhabi, they connected. And the response was a horrified, what? Do you mean he has left? I said, yes, he has left. But this was the order. He said, yes. Was it? I said, yes, okay. He telephoned the ambassador here in England, directly, Mr. Masroor, and said this has happened. Mr. Tahir Ahmad has left, and maybe he has gone to Geneva. That shows that the panic was such that they couldn't wait even for the offices to open and find out where I was heading for. Only this information they had that I had gone. So he asked the ambassador to immediately go to Geneva and find out what his plans were. They thought hopefully he was about to return after a while. So the ambassador happened to know Aftab Ahmad Khan Sahib. So that next morning he spoke to him on telephone, and at a time when Aftab Sahib had no knowledge of my arrival. Either I had not yet arrived or he didn't know. He was just a member of the Jamaat, of course. He was not the Emir of the Jamaat at that time. So he said, he said, has he left? He said, well, if he's left, maybe he's coming here. So he found out and then telephoned him that he has no need to go to Geneva. He's arrived and he's here. So that was the degree of panic or, the shock they received. So I walked normally out of the country. The eyes were blinded by Allah, not by me.
And the wonderful thing is, it's General Zia himself that gave you the key, although inadvertently.
That is it. Through him, God organized it. Like Pharaoh gave the permission for Moses to be brought up in his own house. So he was made responsible because, in a manner of speaking, he was similar to Pharaoh. And also, my assumption, not assumption but inference, is based on one revelation of Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam, where it was revealed to him that a time would come to you, or to the Jamaat. It was addressed to him, like the time of Moses. So Hazrat Masih Maud alayhi salatu wasalam knew that time had not come to him, or would not perhaps come. And Hazrat Muslim Maud also spoke on this. And the inference in both cases was that later on, sometimes it happens that somebody is addressed and somebody else is meant. One of the caliphs maybe goes through the same crisis and in the same manner he is treated by Allah. So when I say, I remember what happened to Moses and the role played by Pharaoh himself. So it is not just a wild guess, it is something related to the revelation of Hazrat Muhammad. Although originally you belong to the south of England like your father does.
Well, that's where he hails from.
But you have become very much Scottish, haven't you?
By heart I am.
And by word of mouth as well.
By accent as well.
That's right. Yes, right. Yes.
I was born in the West Indies,
I was the only
Is
one
it right?
Yes.
So,
Guyana, Georgetown.
is there? I didn't know that. Yes, you were missionary at that time there in Guyana. Yes, yes.
Brothers and sisters were,
And how many years did you spend of your early life in Guyana?
must have been about a few months.
Just a few months.
Yeah, I was just born there.
You were born
Okay.
there, and then you went to Pakistan, and then you returned for a short time.
Yeah, we lived in London for about 6 months or so.
How long did you stay in Pakistan after that?
Again, I mean, I was
Of course
just a
you wouldn't
baby.
remember, but your father would.
About 6 months.
Or 6 months. That still is very, very small age, infancy. And then mostly you were brought up in London in your early life, weren't you?
Glasgow.
From there you were directly posted to Glasgow? From Rabwa to Glasgow?
I spent a few months in London. After
few
a few
months.
months, I was posted to Glasgow.
And there I found you when I arrived here.
Yes, I was posted there in 1966.
That's right. But when I arrived in London, you were still at Glasgow, or in Glasgow,
Yes, yes. Yes.
weren't you? I went to
Yes.
your house, and you remember that?
Yes, I remember that very well. And your family also.
Of course, yes,
Yes.
we all visited there, yes.
You arrived very suddenly.
Like my arrival here. Okay, shall we start next?
Certainly.
Mr. Bashir Orchard, you were about to introduce him to the audience.
I'd like to introduce Mr. Bashir Ahmed Orchard, a very famous English Ahmadi.
Yes.
The most senior English Ahmadi amongst
all the
our
living
community.
Ahmadis here.
Well, the oldest, perhaps not the senior.
And he's also our very beloved missionary.
And you know when I saw him first
In Cardigan.
in Qadian, yes. Which year was that?
I think that was 1944.
44,
No, 1945.
45.
Yes.
Immediately after the war.
No, during the war. Yes, no.
I think it was after the war, no?
No, during the war.
During the war.
Yes,
Acha.
yes, yes.
So the war was over by the end of 44.
The war with
Because
Germany.
I was in Manali, Kullu. No, I think it was 45. You're right, yes.
Yes, yes.
And I was in Kullu, Manali, in the Himalayas on a mountaineering excursion when we heard the news that the Hiroshima bomb had been dropped and all that. So I saw you in 1945 during the war in Qadian.
Yes.
And you were a young army officer at that time,
A lieutenant.
lieutenant. Yes.
Yes, I also remember seeing you.
Do you?
Oh, yes, yes.
But you were so important in those days, and I was just insignificant.
But
One small boy roaming the streets of Qadian. How could you have remembered? Everybody remembered you, of course. An English officer suddenly has arrived and accepted Ahmadiyya. It was so surprising that, for a man of his age, while still serving in the army during the war situation, for him to decide that this is truth and to have the courage to accept it while in service. That was so surprising about everything.
But I believe he has another story.
You have? The
no,
private...
my father has.
What?
I have so many stories.
Yeah,
But this is the authentic one, isn't it?
It was how he ended up in Qadian. It was by chance.
Well,
Well,
more or
not
less-
exactly by chance. I remember. Yes, please. You tell us. You tell us yourself instead of our.
You mean how I first went to Cardigan?
Mm.
Yes, I was on the Burma front with my army unit, and 2 weeks leave was due to me,
Right.
and I had nowhere to go. And there was an Ahmadi Havildar clerk in my unit,
What was his name?
Abdur Rahman Delvi.
Abdul Rahman Elvi. He's now in Canada.
Yes, yes.
Is he the fortunate person who became instrumental in introducing him to? Very good. Excellent.
And he
Mashallah.
suggested to me that I should go to a place called Cardigan
Uh-huh.
and spend a few days with a friend of his.
Right.
But after a while, I came back
Mm-hmm.
and I said, I'm sorry, I can't accept your invitation because Cardigan is such a long distance from Burma front to right across the northern
Yes,
India.
you go all the way to Qadian.
And I did not know who his friend was.
Yes.
I said, I'm sorry, I can't go. But such a look of disappointment came over his face that I felt sorry for him. So I said, all right, I'll go for a couple of days.
It's okay.
And the journey took me 1 week. I arrived at Qadian. There was no one to meet me at the station. And the name of his friend was Mufti Sadiq Sahib.
Is that right?
And so the Tongawala,
He introduced him as his friend.
yes.
Hazrat Mufti Sahib.
Yes. So the Tonga driver took me to Mufti Sahib's
House.
dwelling.
Yes.
And I got out and I climbed some steps and knocked at the door leading to the roof. And a few chains rattled and the door opened. And there was a white-bearded man with a stripped, I think he was just wearing a dhoti.
Right.
And
Yes,
he was...
I remember him. He used to wear dhoti when at home. Yes.
He was as surprised to see me as I was to see him.
Yes.
And so very quickly he told the Tonga driver to take me to the guest house.
Right.
And then about an hour later,
He arrived.
Mufti Sahib came around dressed in his robes and green pugri. And so really it was only out of sympathy for Abdul Rahman Delvi that I decided to go to Qadian, and that's what started it all off.
So, but then I remember you told me once that you decided to leave, and at the Amritsar station,
Yes, that was
you
the time.
had different views. You thought perhaps that was the very best place in the world which you were living.
Yes.
What was that? Tell me that
yes,
part of the story as well.
Very briefly, I arrived at Amritsar station to change trains to take me back on my long journey.
Yes.
And I went into the refreshment room on the station where a lot of people were drinking and smoking.
Yes.
And the atmosphere was so much in contrast
Yes.
to the pure and holy atmosphere of Qadian
Yes,
that I could cut it with a knife, and I felt the contrast. And in those days I used to drink quite a lot.
Yes.
In fact, when I went to Qadian that time, I had 2 bottles of alcohol in my baggage. By some good fortune, I didn't take any while I was there.
Yes.
But there and then on Amritsar station, I hadn't accepted Islam then, and I hadn't even thought I would do.
I see.
But I made up my mind I would give up drinking. And as soon as I arrived back in my unit, again after about 1 week, I had a few bottles in my tent. And I remember it was night time, and I took them one by one and just chucked them in the air. I don't know where they fell, but that was my first step. I gave up drinking.
Not in the receptive hands, I hope.
I hope they broke when they fell.
That's right. Yes. Now that's very interesting. This is how Allah organizes. This is how one goodness leads to another. There is a deep lesson that even small acts of goodness, with purity of heart and mind and intentions, will not go in vain. That
sometimes
small
I
little
think
thing, will lead you on to another type of goodness.
But sometimes I think my brother really deserved to be enlightened, because he was a priest and he had been the religious member of the family since childhood, and I wasn't particularly religious. So I sometimes
I think
feel
I
that
should trust Allah's decision more than yours in that case. Allah knew better. You see, to be religious apparently, or even to some depth as you can see from outside, is something else. But the hearts which Allah likes to receive, that's a different story altogether. So he has passed his verdict. You don't have to bother at all about who was the better one among you. You were, of course, in the sight of Allah. So, alhamdulillah. Yes. Shall we pass on to the next
Certainly.
introduction?
We have Mr. Karim Khan with us in the
I
studio.
think I know him.
And I think you know him very well.
Okay.
And
Son of Dr. Said Khan, and who also happens to be my son-in-law, right?
that's correct,
Yes,
yes.
good.
well known.
Yes.
And here's Nisar,
Yes, we've introduced Nisar, and he's the son.
eldest
of,
son. Huh?
Eldest
Youngest son.
No, the youngest.
I'm awfully sorry.
Because our names are very similar, you say. There's Nasir and Nasir.
That's right,
And
yes.
I'm Nisar. That doesn't stop there because I have a smaller
Right.
sister
You're the
called
youngest,
Nasra.
huh? Yes.
I'm the youngest son.
MashaAllah. And in order of marriage, who was first married, who was second, and who was third in order of marriage?
Abida.
Abida was the first, Abida, my eldest sister.
No, I'm not talking of daughters. I mean, your sister. I'm talking of the brothers alone at this time. Among the brothers, who got married first?
So it would be Nasir, then Nasir. I did go
That
in
was
order.
one who was married to a Scottish lady.
Yes.
That was Nasir, wasn't he?
Yes.
He's the eldest.
Yes.
Right, right. And then you?
No, I'm the last.
You're the last?
It just happened last
There's
month.
Nasser in between, huh?
In between, I mean, of course. I had that incident in mind, you know.
I see.
And your brother is married to the second brother?
Nasir, he is married to half Pakistani, half Scottish girl.
Half Pakistani, half Scottish.
Yes.
Which
In Glasgow.
in Glasgow.
Yes.
Daughter of?
Mr. Hamid, isn't it?
That's correct.
Hey, Mr. Hamid, he's not a well-known person. I don't think you would know him. But
No, I don't. In fact, I don't. So anyway, they are happily married, alhamdulillah. Huh? I hope so.
They could be more happy.
Right.
There's always improvement in everything.
So the Imam Sahib London Mosque is, doesn't require an introduction.
No.
Shall we move on to the next topic of our discussion if any time is left?
Well, I believe that
Around 25 minutes?
25.
Okay.
I believe that Kareem has a question he'd like to ask.
Kareem?
Azur.
I think everyone has got questions.
Of course, all right. Yes. Get hold of the microphone and let's come to the question part.
One question is that obviously we believe in the day of resurrection. And one question is, how will the process of accountability take place?
I think for that you don't have to wait that long. It begins here. Every day, every moment of your actions, the accountability begins. You don't realize. And that accountability is imprinted on your soul. The personality which is going to develop in the life after resurrection is being created much before that. So of that we have a reference in Hadith and also in the Holy Quran. Of course, based on the Holy Quran, we have details in Hadith that on your right and on your left, there are two angels always jotting down your actions, and the right one records the good acts you perform, and the left one records the bad deeds. So mostly nowadays, I think the left one is very busy. So the right angel might almost have closed the book and waiting till the last breath. But of course, in every man, however bad he may be, I'm quite certain he has moments of goodness. Some moments of goodness are passing, and after that, man returns to the old style of life, which is wicked in the sight of Allah. But there are some moments where one makes a decision which is lasting. And from then on, the book on the right side begins to be filled. Because that is the type of goodness I just mentioned, which leads on to other acts of goodness. And such people, with the grace of Allah, end up at the right moment as believers when they die. So this is resurrection. So what is going to happen there will be a presentation of the record. So it will be no new question answers, because in some cases maybe, but mostly we are told that the skins will speak. They will recreate the picture. And man would say, addressing to your skin, the skin is only a sort of parchment. So all that expression is metaphorical, should not be taken too literally, because the same skin will not be there. But it's only a metaphorical expression that your skins go on recording what you do here. And when they will present the record of each moment of your life, man would be surprised that you're talking against us. You're bringing forth all these things. And they'll say, because God has given us antaqan Allah. God has made us speak. Otherwise we could not. So when God makes somebody speak, he has to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So as I told you, accountability begins here and is completed here. What will happen there would be a sort of replay of the same, recorded life history of yours. Next, please. Anyone? You're the moderator.
Well, as the moderator, I would like to ask Ms. Bashir Ahmed.
Okay.
Orchard.
Right, in view of the fact that the soul is created along with the body in the womb of the mother, then what does it mean that the soul will return to Allah? Because it hasn't come from anywhere.
No, but the body will also return to Allah. Everything will return to Allah. The entire creation will. And that is how the end of the universe is depicted so clearly in the Holy Quran, in so many words, that everything will return to us, will come to nothingness. And then Allah says, Kama badana awwala khalqin nu'idu. But this is not the end all. Then we will return to the same process of creation with which we began in the first place. So we are nothing as ourselves. We have no entity, but whatever we draw, the form of existence we draw, our authority for being here in the world or in the universe, we draw from Allah. That authority belongs to Him. So the withdrawal of that authority is returned to Him. A complete reversal to nothingness and reappearance in that form which Allah so likes. This is a very profound philosophical question and also scientific question. The scientists nowadays are really wondering as to what happens in the black hole and what would happen if the entire universe is pulled back into that something of nothingness. What would happen and what happens? Sometimes scientists propose mathematically some possibilities of re-emergence of the same universe into other dimensions, as if it's just a hole through which you pass and appear in another dimension of which we have no concept. And they have mathematically proved the possibility of 14 dimensions. The time I remember I read the article, they had reached up to 14. So we live only in 4-dimensional world. So there are so many others to be conceived only mathematically, but God knows how many possible dimensions there are to existence. So they believe that death on one side of the curtain or the hole is life on the other side. So a seesaw goes on being played. To return to Allah, in fact, means is that we'll return to that ultimate force of power from which we emanated, under whose influence we were created. So as you say here in England, dust to dust and ashes to ashes. So that is a sort of return to Allah. So the souls will also return to Allah in that form, in that way. So that means after every new creation of the universe, what is left is the very essence of that experiment that is in the form of souls, consciousnesses. And then everything is back to the crucible. And then it melts into nothingness. Then a new experiment takes place. And then again, new souls are drawn out of that material form with which God goes on experimenting. And after the souls are extracted, then they're taken away to some new dimensions, and the whole of the material is put back to the melting pot. That is the sort of concept I have. This is my concept of how things are going on, but based on the Holy Quran, not my personal concept. My inference from the Holy Quran is what I have just told you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Zur. Out of all of the books written by the Promised Messiah, alayhi salam, which one is your favourite?
I think it goes on changing in a sense, in a manner of speaking, because at different times some books are more related to the situation and seem to be addressing me directly more than other books. And so I keep on, shifting my internal assessment of relative importances. Of course, every word of the Prophet is important, but this happens in every case. I remember when I started reading Ghalib, for instance, there were certain verses I liked, and the others which I thought were less important, and then second, third, fifth reading or remembrance of the most famous points went on shifting my choices and preferences from these to others. And after that, everything got, all mixed up. You only need a verse first by situation, and then it comes to you. That sort of thing happens. And during the recitation of the Quran, right from my childhood, I used to mark the verses, that this verse is very special. And then so many other special verses started coming up. Almost every page was marked, flagged. And so how could I mark everything? Every verse had to be marked. So that is, I think, the answer to your question. But in generality, I think Hazrat Masih Maud should be understood at his best when he is not involved in any debate with his opponents. When he is just performing his task of prophethood, of purifying people, of giving them wisdom and truth, deeper underlying truths of existence. There, that is in Malfuzat. And he comes and speaks to the people in generality without addressing any enemy. There he appears to be right at his best. And in his poetry, he is at his best when he speaks of love. Love of God, love of Muhammad Rasulullah, love of the Holy Quran, love of the people. If you must know him, you know him there. And that is his true personality. When he is involved in debates, then many a time he is fighting a war, a battle, and strategies are employed. And a cunning enemy has to be rebutted in the same terms. Sometimes you find such harsh language used as if against Jesus Christ. That one shudders. Look, he claims to be Messiah himself, and this is the language he has used against Jesus Christ. But another time when you hear him talk of Jesus Christ and read him write about Jesus Christ, the picture he paints is so lovable, so beautiful, so wonderful. And he seems to be suffering for him when he suffered. So this is the true personality which is uninfluenced by a specific situation. Now, then when you read him again elsewhere, then he describes, he said, look here, when I respond to the Christian attacks on Rasulullah Kareem Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, my blood boils and I'm so helpless. They can call Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah an impostor because Christianity does not make it binding on every Christian to believe in every prophet of God. But look at my situation. I'm helpless, totally bound hand and foot. I know Jesus was a prophet of Allah, so how can I take my revenge? Which, willingly I have to, because he says I can't tolerate this. the filthy language used against Muhammad is so hurting. So he said, I have invented a strategy. I do not attack that image of Jesus which is presented by the Quran. Never once have I ever even referred to that. I only attack that imaginary Jesus which Jesus was not.
Yes.
You see, that Jesus which is referred to in the New Testament in the corrupted form, that Jesus which is presented by St. Paul and others later on, of which we have no evidence in the Quran or in any genuine biblical statements. So he says, there, I take my revenge. He said, if that is your Son of God, then this is that according to your admissions. Now, there too, his personality appears to be, although the words seem to be harsh, but he is recognized in his deeper truth, because he never ever, as they say nowadays, alleges Jesus to have done something of which there is no positive proof in the biblical statements or in the statements of their own church fathers and divines. So not as an iota of a character or a style of life is attributed to Jesus Christ by Hazrat Masih Islam, which is not founded and which is not as such acceptable to the Christians themselves. He brings all these different references together to create another image, which is hurting. But they know they can't do anything about it because this is what they have admitted themselves. This was Jesus. But when they attack Hazrat Muhammad Rasulullah, they go on doing, imagining things and concocting stories. He called the mountain to his side. Mountain said, didn't come. He said, all right, I'll go to the mountain. All this, hocus pocus nonsense. So this is also again a difference. Even in the severest attitude against his opponents, he never deviated even an iota from the truth. So this is how I think Masih Maud should be read and understood. Otherwise, if you don't read him as I have explained, maybe at times you will be surprised what's happening. He's not that loving person we knew. So when he is just speaking of God, of Muhammad Rasulullah, of the Quran, of people, of humanity, of his natural reactions to the enemies, etc., of services to mankind, there he is, of course, at his best in the sense that he is there, pure and unadulterated person, undiluted, as he was. Okay?
Thank you.
Who next? As you please, you are the moderator.
I have one question.
Yes, please. Hand over the...
He already has a mic.
Okay then.
You have one here already.
Why not have another one? Okay.
Have two.
It is mentioned in the chapter Al-Qalam, there's a list of certain type of people we shouldn't compromise with, like those who backbite and slander, etc.
Yes.
And at the end it says, and those who are of doubtful birth.
Yes.
Why are they included, people of doubtful birth?
So. I don't think there is any such thing.
The reference is...
Bring the book. You got the reference?
The reference is chapter 6.
Would you read?
Yes. Chapter 68.
In the meantime, we shift to another question and ask someone to bring the Holy Quran and open it to you do it.
68 chapter?
Chapter 68.
You see, there is, I remember, there is a reference to some people who were of doubtful birth, and they were pointed out in response to their filth and extreme aggression against the Holy Prophet, that this is your leadership. But the illegitimate children have nowhere in the Holy Quran been condemned. Because it is against a principal teaching of the Quran which speaks of all children, all without exception, who are born, they are born in the image of God. no exception is made as to the legitimate children, illegitimate, and of course it's no fault of theirs if they are illegitimately, given birth. So that is, created illegitimately. There's no fault of theirs. So this is a specific event. If this is the one which I have in mind, if that is the one you are referring to, then let's see what the meaning is.
So the verses which refer to this one is Surah Qalam, verse number 9. It says, فَلَا تُطِلْ مُكَذِّبِينَ.
That is it. That is a different thing altogether.
14, I think the verse is 14.
But read on from here. That is the context.
المكذبين ودوا لو تدهنوا فيدهنون ولا تطع كل حلاف مهين هماز مشاء بنميم مناع للخير معتد أثيم عتل بعد ذلك زنيم.
Read it. Read the translation, please.
Translation is, so comply not with the wishes of those who reject the truth. They wish that thou shouldn't be blind, so that they may also be blind, and yield not to any mean swearer, backbiter, one who goes about slandering, forbidder of truth, transgressor, sinful, ill-mannered, and in addition to that, of doubtful birth.
Now, this is to a specific person. It's not a discussion in generalities. What happens is the Holy Quran does not name him, but the society knew him. There was an enemy of the Holy Prophet who was of this character. Every Arab knew that he is of that character. So the people are advised that you follow such a man and leave a man like the Holy Prophet, whom you yourself used to profess and admit that he is Amin. He is the most trustworthy man in the whole of Arabia. So this is the reference, which is a specific reference. It does not speak of generalities in relation to the enemies of Islam, not at all. If all the enemies of Islam are described like this, then of course people have right to take exception to this, but it's not so. Enemies of a certain type, the leaders, who are dedicated to hostility without rhyme or reason, just they are dedicated to hostility and rejection of truth, as the Holy Quran says. And when you read their characters, people who are always in the forefront, then you will find there are very similar things happening here. That is why once Hazrat Sheikh, what was his name, in Qadian, who published a book on this issue, on this very issue. You see, sometimes Masih Maud also used a similar language, similar to the Quran, in some specific cases. You know, that some enemies of his were like this. So, mullahs took very strong exception to it. They said, absolutely shocking. Look at him. He's saying, as if all Muslims are na'udhu this, like you misunderstood. Okay. So, one of Hazrat Muhammad's companion then started investigating into the background of many of his opponents who were of that description, and then published a book challenging that if I am wrong, sue me in the court. He collected material which proved till the last the point that was mentioned, which is under discussion in this verse. So that is about a very few people, a very special, filthy character, who generally take the leadership of hostility into their own hands. Right?
Thank you.
Now I think I'm told that there is very little time left. Well, I'm not sorry that we discussed something irrelevant to the subject of discussion today. Today we had gathered for a frank, relaxed question-answer session. But this day being a very special day, 10 years ago I had arrived here in England from Pakistan. So we started discussing that day and some relevant issues. So I'm very happy that you all came here. I'm very, very happy indeed that the time spent passed very rapidly and very quickly. Happy in the sense it must have been good time, otherwise departure or parting is always sad. Allah bless you, coming from all the way from different places, Scotland, from Birmingham, and from next door.
From around the corner.
And you have come from?
No, I've actually come from Somerset.
Somerset.
I'm
Of course,
Somerset,
see, we've all gathered here. Allah bless you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.